right, welcome. Today in our first video, we're going to talk a little bit about college loans in terms of our finance unit here. So college loans, that's a big deal for many of you, especially coming up after this year or for you juniors in the next year or so. So just a quick snapshot of 2020 student loans. So the amount of student loan debt, 1.57 trillion in the United States. 54% of college attendees take on debt, including student loans, to pay for their education. Average amount of student loan debt per borrower, 37,500. Again, that is a fairly substantial amount of money. And so today we're going to take a look a little bit at just thinking about for yourself in terms of your own potential student debt and what that could look like, and just to kind of get that ball rolling. So another graphic here to help kind of reinforce some connections that we're going to make. So this is just showing the potential earnings. So lifetime potential earnings based on different degrees or amount of school completed. So less than high school work. This would be lifetime, right? So a little less than $1 million. Having a high school diploma puts you at 1.3 million lifetime earning. Some college, which means maybe you did some maybe a couple years but then dropped out, 1.5. Associates, that'd be typically like a 2-year degree, 1.7. Bachelor's degree, 2.2. 2.6 masters, 3.2 million for doctor, and professional degree, 3.6 million. So again, that's average lifetime earnings based on amount of school completed. So at this point right now, you guys are less than high school, right? You guys haven't graduated yet. So if you were to drop out today, average wise, not everybody, right? There are those special cases, but that would be kind of the average lifetime earnings for your lifetime. Okay. To lighten the mood a little bit here, because things are going to get a little bit serious here. Here are a couple jokes you can stop and read if you wish at your leisure, or look at the PowerPoint to get a closer look here. Okay. All right. So to some important details about college loans. We're going to focus a little bit more on the specific federal loans and what the potential is you have to borrow and what that looks like or could look like after 4 years of college completed in terms of total amount that you potentially would be in debt. And so that's a big part of today is thinking about that amount of money and being in debt kind of, the moment you start going to college, you're in debt right away. And so that's something to really think about as you get started here, going to college, looking at colleges, and figuring out what works for you. So there's typically two types of loans. There would be loans for dependent students and independent students. That's kind of how they break it down here, and what you are allowed to borrow as a federal loan regarding subsidized versus unsubsidized. So subsidized loans, those are the better ones. That means no interest accumulates while you are in college, right? While you are actually attending college, the interest does not get calculated. It just is a flat, here's the amount you borrowed. At the end of 4 years, that's the amount that you owe. And then interest starts accruing. Unsubsidized are not as good, right? But again, the interest rates are usually better than if you were to do private loans, that kind of thing. So it's not as good just because the interest does start to accumulate as you attend college, right? While you are in school. So you guys at this point are likely dependent, right? You are the dependent students. That means your parents claim you on their taxes, right? You are a dependent of your parents or guardian. And so this would be where you guys would fall. So this is kind of broken down by years, right? So first year undergraduate, that's where most of you would be starting next year as a freshman in college, if you are going to college next year. And then second year, third year, and beyond. So these just give the different amounts that you could borrow or can borrow, and then the amount that as much of that can be subsidized, right? So they only allow you to borrow part subsidized, and then the rest would be unsubsidized. Okay, so again, subsidized means there's no interest while you are actually in college. The interest does not accumulate. Whereas unsubsidized, the interest does accumulate right away. The moment you take that loan, it starts accruing that time. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this chart here. If you look at your note sheet, it should be on the second page. Right, so it should look like this. You should see kind of two of the same charts. We're going to fill in. We're just going to highlight some things on this chart, and then actually use the worksheet chart version that you see kind of halfway down to make some calculations. So you guys at this point are undergraduate borrowers, right? That would be what your percent that you'd be looking at in terms of your loan rates. On this table here, this just kind of lays out the 4 years, right? So the 4 years, this would be freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, right? Or first year, second year, third year, fourth year. So the amount that you borrow unsubsidized, right? So no interest, is $3,000 each of those years, and the rest of that amount that you're allowed to borrow up to the maximum of $7,500 for that junior senior year, the rest of that is unsubsidized. And so when you start looking at calculating the interest or how much you would owe after each year, we can then kind of figure out, get an estimate as to how much total you would owe. So again, this is the amount that is determined by FAFSA, the amount that you can borrow subsidized. So that is something that FAFSA helps you figure out, or that they will allow you to borrow a certain amount subsidized based on your FAFSA. The unsubsidized, right, is also determined by FAFSA, but interest accumulates right from the onset, right? So right from the outset of the loan, the moment you take that loan, it is then calculating interest. Okay, so in terms of our loans, right, we have 2 of them, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the formula, the loan rate calculation formula, rather than the TVM solver to go through these calculations, right? And we'll make some connections with the TVM solver here as we go on in this unit. But for today, right now, we're going to use this formula, and this formula has a couple parts. It has the P, right, is the amount borrowed. Remember, that's P is principal. I is the rate, so your percent, whatever the interest rate is. K is the number of compoundings, right? So remember, on the TVM solver, C/Y is the number of compoundings per year. That's what K represents in this formula, and T is years, right? So T is in years. Okay, so this formula is what we're going to use, and on your loan worksheet, right? So again, at this point, we're going to be working on this part of the worksheet, this table. You already have the first calculation done. The first sample calculation already is done for that first year. So after your first year, here's what this shows us. We're going to take these values, right? So subsidized, 3,000. 3,000 is subsidized. So that means there's no interest calculated on that after that first year or during that year. So that 3,000 is just going to be added in our total at the end. It's the unsubsidized that we're going to calculate the interest on for that first year of school. And so that's where this formula is coming in, right? So the unsubsidized amount is our principal, right? So 2,500. The interest rate was 2.75. Remember, this calculation is 100 times the number of compounds per year, which is actually every day. And then for the number of years, so think about this, right? This is your first year of college, and then you go to college for 4 years. This is going to give us the total that interest is accumulating for the course of that 4 years, right? So sorry, not just for that first year, but for the whole 4 years, okay? So this value right here, 2,790.68 cents. That's the amount that has accumulated over the course of 4 years, right? Because you took this loan out your first year, you went to school for 4 years. This is the amount that has now accumulated. And so after that first year, for that first year of college that you attended, right? So for that first year of college, at the end of 4 years, sorry, I just broke my pen. Oh, no, I didn't. At the end of that 4 years, you are in debt from that first year, 5,760 and 68 cents. Okay, so you took those loans out your first year. After 4 years, that's how much in debt you currently are. Okay, so we're going to do that calculation for the next 3 years. So let's think about this, right? For that next year, we'd have another 3,000 that's subsidized. So that will just be added in, no interest included there. But for that 3,500 then that we borrow, that's unsubsidized. Again, we're using that formula, so we're plugging in the 3,500. Again, interest rate is still the same. It's still compounded every day, right? For 3 years, right? So this one is only for 3 years. Okay, because you're taking it out your second year of college, it starts accruing interest right when you take out that loan, so it's accumulating interest for 3 years. Okay, so this value, this amount right here, this is the amount that the unsubsidized has become after that 3 years. So total after your second year, or from your second year, right? So this would represent right here, this would represent the total that you are in debt from that second year of college. Okay. I want you to take a moment and pause the video and try those next two. Right? Try those next two. Think about the pattern here. Notice we're going down from 4 to 3. Think about that next year would be 2. But see if you can make those calculations here. Make sure when you do use when you are using your calculator, use parentheses. Right? Make sure you're typing these in parentheses as you go. All right, if you've tried those out, you can go ahead and check your answers here. So from the third year of college, when you borrow that 4,500, it turns into 4,754.42. So a total of 7,754 and 42 cents from that third year of college, and then from that fourth year of college, there are totals. So those totals in that final column, right? All of those that I boxed in, those 4 totals are representing the total from each of those years of college, right? After the completed 4-year program. So if we want to add those up to find out our total, right? So the total amount of debt we are currently in, there it is. Okay. And so that's a pretty big number. Make that clear. 27,941 and 54 cents. Okay. So using the interest rate formula, we made some calculations here, and now we have an idea of kind of that a scenario, right? So this isn't going to be everybody. This just gives you kind of an idea of how quickly some of that debt really can pile on. Now, this would be assuming that you don't make any payments, that you're not doing anything different, or again, some of you, scholarships, that kind of thing. That's where some of this plays in, where if you get enough scholarships or you have enough scholarships and you don't need to take out as much of the federal loans, that's great, right? So this would be kind of just one potential scenario that some of you might run into. Okay, so now what, right? 27,000 in debt. At this point, we have we're going to go back and say a 5% interest rate for 10 years, right? So at this point, we can do a little more calculating in terms of what our monthly payment plan looks like if we're looking at paying it off in 10 years. The link is in the PowerPoint, this web calculator. You can also search student loan repayment calculator. There's quite a few out there. All of them might give you slightly different values or slightly different answers. That's going to be the way it is. They're going to be close to each other. But let's take a look at this one here. So if I click on maybe. So if I go and click on loan that link, if I'm using this one, so the loan payment amount, we have 27,000. let's see, 942 rounding up. We're gonna go with a 5% interest rate, and we're gonna try to pay that off in 10 years. Let's go with a minimum payment. It depends on the loan. Um, there might be a minimum payment and it just might take you longer to pay off. But if you're looking to pay it off in a certain amount of time, right? Not necessarily in just the amount of time that they will give you, because the longer you take to pay it off, the more that they're going to make interest off of you. So if you have to make a minimum payment of $300, but you want to pay it off in 10 years, right? So minimum payment's 300. We want to pay it off in 10. Let's see what that looks like. So it looks like our total monthly payment, if we would like to pay it off in 10 years, would be $337. Right? And here it gives us a breakdown a little bit. 118 payments. Total we would have paid is $35,400, and total interest paid $7,500, basically, right? $7,500. Okay. So let's take a look here. There we go. At this point, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to take a little time to look at a college or colleges you're interested in, or for those that are seniors, use your information from the colleges that you've applied to or that you know that you're attending, and just take a moment and look up tuition, room, and board. A simple way to do that is it's just Googled Indiana college tuition, and it brings up um, a nice little easy click. You can look at different colleges here. It lists the tuition right on that that page right here. So you may not find exactly the college you're looking for, but there you go. And typically, if you just Google, right, so Goshen College, went, let's add tuition there. You can see it's already popped up. Yeah, so 34,500 is the average yearly tuition. And think about, so here's kind of the point of thinking about this in terms of the colleges you're interested in. Back here, we talked about each year regarding subsidized and unsubsidized. So, for example, that first year we were able to take out 5,500 total, and then 6,500, and then 7,500 total. Well, that's only like a quarter, if that, of some of those tuitions, right? So, like 7,500, that would be almost just a fifth of the amount that Goshen College would require for tuition. So, again, that's kind of just going based on. That's not talking about any scholarships or anything else that is potentially there, financial aid packages, things like that. That's just looking at straight up. Okay, if you were to take the federal loans at the very least, what kind of dent does that make in that tuition cost, right? And then think about, so where's the rest of it going to come, right? So part of this is very much informational, right? You need to know, you need to understand kind of what the circumstance is, and just understanding kind of the weight of taking on this responsibility, right? The big thing, right? So some of the key things I want to talk about based on what we've done so far. Again, I'll let you take a moment here and take a few minutes to look up your colleges, look up your information, and do some thinking here. But some things to consider and keep in mind as you are looking at colleges and student loans. Subsidized, right? So subsidized would be the way to go, as much as you can with subsidized, right? So remember, that is interest free until you graduate, right? And then that's the key. Finish college, right? If you start it, you need to finish it, right? So I know again, there's different things happen, life happens, but the student debt that you occur, right, or that you get, is still going to be there whether you finish or not. And by finishing, you gained that earning power, right? Remember that graphic I showed at the beginning, that bar graph showing how much potential lifetime earning based on your degree. Okay, so by finishing school, you've gained that earning power, and that potential higher total maximum. Okay, so some jobs, something to consider. Some jobs have loan forgiveness, right? So personally, myself, education. education had loan forgiveness opportunities. That wasn't necessarily the reason I went into education, but it's good to know that that some careers do provide potential loan forgiveness. Things to consider, right? So I know some in terms of medical doctors, things like that. Once they sometimes signing on or signing on to, I don't want to say signing on, but getting hired a signing bonus sometimes is, over the course of a few years, their student loans will be paid off by their employer, things like that. Maybe not quite exactly like that, but there are certain circumstances where that does occur. Okay. Uh, Pay extra each month, right? So we talked a little bit about this with the car loan stuff, but if you pay more than the monthly payment, then you actually pay more against the principal, which is the amount that you actually borrowed, which is the amount that the interest gets calculated on. So, if possible, and I am going to be honest, it's very hard to sometimes be able to do that, but if possible, pay more than just the minimum, and that will pay down the principal faster, and that will lower your interest, the amount that you pay interest. Excuse me. Sometimes, one more thing here. Sometimes you can refinance, which just means typically you're looking to refinance to get a lower rate. So if we look at that same example with the 3.5% interest rate rather than a 5, here's what your monthly loan payment would be, and then your total interest is much less as well. Okay. So those are just some things to consider, and some things that we wanted to talk about during this financial calculations unit. Again, don't want to frighten or scare too much here, but it is very important to make sure you do understand and consider what does go into debt, right? So at this point, you can go ahead and move on to the next video.